Alrighty then. I want to welcome everybody that'll be viewing this at a later date. We are here on Old Norcross, and we're looking tonight at John chapter 10. And as we get started, I'm going to start off with just a couple of paragraphs of introduction here. Tom Wright writes, "We stood on the cliffs and watched as the mother birds swooped in from the sea with mouthfuls of fish. There below us were thousands of young birds, all waiting eagerly, all screaming their peculiar cry. They were all jostling and pushing and falling over and scrambling about. But somehow, unerringly, the mothers picked out the single voice of their own chick from the teeming, noisy crowd. It seemed like a miracle. Then I suppose we shouldn't be too surprised. Perhaps all human voices sound alike to birds. Yet a father or a mother will recognize their child's voice in a crowded room. But those of us who don't have much to do with the bird or animal kingdoms on a daily basis are often startled at just how much animals can distinguish between different people as well as between members of their own species. To this day, in the Middle East, a shepherd will go into a crowded sheepfold and call out his own sheep one by one, naming them. They will recognize his voice and come to him." So, have you ever been able to instantly recognize the voice of a loved one in the midst of a noisy crowd? Yeah, describe it. Let's hear about it.
Helen, it's not the voice, but Helen, whenever we go shopping sometimes, and we get separated because she's looking at her size and I'm looking at my size, which are not the same, and she loses track of me or vice versa, she'll do a special whistle. A special whistle. I cannot copy it because whenever I try to find her, I just say Helen because I can't copy it. But she'll do the special whistle, and I know exactly where she is. But I recognize her by her voice too. So I recognize it's true. You recognize your kids' voices.
You do. That's right. All right. Well, let's dive in. John chapter 10. Jesus is speaking. "Very truly I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs in by another way, is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him because they do not know the voice of strangers." Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So again, Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved, and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand runs away because the hired hand does not care for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. I have received this command from my Father. All right? Let's break this down. Back to verses 1 through 5. What contrasts does Jesus set up in this opening parable? The New Revised Standard calls it figure of speech. It's a parable. The word is parabole. But what contrast does he set up there in verses 1 through 5? The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd, right?
And the other's a robber and a thief.
So the difference between, they won't follow a stranger, right? They will run from him because they don't know the voice of strangers. And as you can, as John says, they didn't understand this, which is not surprising. We encounter that a lot. But yeah, those are some of the contrasts that he's talking about here. Verse 10, Jesus says, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. Now the promise of full life, which Wright translates full to overflowing, is as relevant for us today as it was then. The modern Western world has discovered how unsatisfying materialism really is and is looking for something more, something beyond. Many thieves have told lies and have deceived the sheep, stolen them and left them for dead. So how might we, as Jesus' sheep, and that's what we are here, how might we learn to be more attentive to his voice and less easily deceived by those who seek to harm us?
Being in the Word.
Yes.
And having a life, a prayerful life.
Yes. Prayerful, F-U-L-L. Yeah. Being in the Word. Worship. The community. There's power in community.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It hurts me to see folks just separate. And
Service also. If
yes,
you're doing
yes,
service
yes,
regularly,
yes.
that is definitely one way.
It was moving Monday night for sure. I'm still feeling the effects from our time at the co-op. Surprised Jim Durant to no end.
I bet it did.
We were there 3 hours.
Says the man who's up front behind a computer, Jim. Okay. Carol and I bagged produce and crated stuff, and we had a great guy who was helping us. I mean, he was super. But that's a lot of
Physical.
Potatoes and
Was he up front with the people who come in and,
Jim was.
yeah.
yeah.
I worked up there with him for several times in a
Yeah,
minute, and it's challenging.
I'm gonna tell Lisa, look, I ain't cut out for that stuff. Yeah. Customer service, I can help you all day with that. I'll pull out my Six Flags card and say, this is where I belong. Right? No, but no, we did, and we were crating, and crating is the process of opening boxes and pulling out cans, and you see what the expiration date is on it, and you write it in marker. And then for some strange reason, you mark, at least at first, you mark through the barcode. And I really didn't know. I'm embarrassed to ask. And I ended up not having to ask because as we were doing it, I looked at the gentleman who was helping us and I said, we're doing this so that somebody doesn't take this and sell this, aren't we? And he goes, yep, that's exactly why we're marking through the barcode. He said, because you'll have one, you'll have one or two
We'll turn them to the store.
who, yeah, so, yeah, so.
I don't have many.
I thought that was interesting, but service, it just brought it up. It really was. It was a lot of fun. I mean, honestly,
yeah.
It was fun. I
enjoyed,
Yeah.
it was rewarding,
Yeah,
knowing you were putting stuff together
Brian
for
was there.
somebody who really needed help.
subdued.
Yeah, he was
I
very
was
quiet.
concerned about the Kool-Aid man. He was subdued.
Yeah, he
Very
was.
subdued.
Maybe that's how he is there.
Maybe so.
It could
But
be.
he was up front in a very prominent place as the people came through.
Yep.
Doing
He's
his
been
job.
taught.
Yeah, so, yeah. So that was, so yeah, service. That really is something to that. There really is. That's good. That's good. All right. Now, look with me at verses 11 through 18. There's one mark. What distinguishing mark of the Good Shepherd does Jesus repeat 3 times in verses 11 through 18?
Lays down his life.
Yes, sir.
For his sheep, or for the sheep, yeah.
Which on the face of it sounds, well, if he lays down his life for the sheep, well, once he's dead, the sheep are in big trouble. No, but that's the mysterious economy of the cross and the resurrection, which we'll come to. But yeah, now the original sheep that are, of course, the people of Israel. Jesus is calling them and those from among his Jewish contemporaries who are ready for the call. Right? They're hearing his voice, they're trusting him, and they're coming to him. But as Israel's prophets and wise writers had always hinted, the God of Israel was never interested only in Israel. Go back to Genesis 12 and the call of Abram. Thank you very much. The call to Abram was, go to the land that I will show you, and I'm going to bless you, and through your offspring, all the nations of the world will be blessed. It was never just about Israel. God's call to Israel was for the sake of the whole world. So in verse 16, the other sheep are that great company from every nation under heaven that God intends to save, and save through Jesus. The Jewish Messiah is to become the Lord, the shepherd of the whole world. So the Gentiles were no longer the enemy. They are sheep. We are sheep who have not been brought into the sheepfold. So at that time, right? So think about how might that announcement have sounded in a world, Jesus' own world, run by Rome. How might that have sounded?
Like an insult.
Well, yeah.
Or
All these verses, I can't imagine how the disciples couldn't possibly have understood, or if they did, they didn't even believe it.
But yeah, a little bit of both, yeah.
it's kind of far-fetched, I guess, back then. So,
Treasonous too.
yeah, do you really
My sheep.
want to believe this or
Right.
stick with the old way?
Jesus to make these claims was treasonous. Remember, it was a trumped up charge of treason that Jesus was brought up on. So we have to remember that for sure. So yeah, these are treasonous words, right? All right. So how does Jesus' desire to open wide the sheepfold for all who would hear his voice challenge some of our ways of doing church today? Jesus says, open wide.
Well,
How does that challenge?
it challenges him because any person should be able to walk through any door of any church
Oh, yeah.
and be welcome into the fold.
Yep.
But they're not necessarily.
Nope.
Sometimes we make that distinction, that they should not be.
Yeah.
Which challenges some of our basic.
Yeah. No, you're right. There's a song by a group called, not a group, a gentleman named Neil Morris. He's a Christian. Carol has had her fill of Neil Morris. But it's a song called Free. And in that song, the chorus says, and I'm not welcome. I'm a freak, a riddle, the kind you trust too little. I am the one you call the other. You can't take home to mother. I am the angst provider, the ultimate outsider, and I'm not welcome where the work is, not in your homes or in your churches. Well, that hits me right upside the head. every time I hear that. You know, I mean, because there is a part of that. And part of the complaints about Paul, you know, we're doing this series on Paul's letters on Wednesday mornings. And part of the complaint about Paul is, well, he's just, it's a flimsy gospel. It's a, y'all come, you know, just throws doors wide open and he'll accept anybody, right? They can't hold they don't hold the bulletins upside down. They don't know an introit from an outroit. They don't know what a benediction or an invocation is. By the way, an invocation is an opening prayer. A benediction is a closing prayer. Well, why don't we call it that? Well, just shh.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's what they are.
That's one method for us to differentiate outsiders and insiders.
Yeah. That's
Just
right.
even that simple thing.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. When I start talking about expiation and propitiation and justification by faith and all that stuff, woo, and I think some churches took it too far, though. Bill Hybels at Willow Creek, a long time ago, admits it. Took the crosses out. Took the crosses out. And if we didn't have that old wooden thing that wasn't supposed to stand up in the church, except at Easter for the bags for the money and all that, we didn't have that in our sanctuary.
We wouldn't have a cross.
We didn't have crosses.
We have a cross at the entrance of the
But in the
driveway.
same,
Both
right.
driveways have crosses.
But in the sanctuary, he's talking about.
In the sanctuary.
So what they do, they just didn't want to have anything in the sanctuary, seeker friendly, seeker services. They didn't want to have anything that would be a something. Got rid of the choir, got rid of, now, you know, that was 25, 30 years ago, okay? But it does challenge our ways of doing church, that Jesus' desire is to just basically just throw this thing wide open for all who would hear his voice. And he really ticked off the Jewish leaders, because that's not what they wanted to hear. We alone are God's people. That's what Amos said, right? Do I need to define alone? We alone, you know? But Amos didn't, there was more to that. And there was a reason why God had chosen Israel. All right, got a long paragraph here to read. The Father loves the shepherd. Now we're moving along. Jesus is the shepherd. The Father loves the shepherd, especially because he will express the Father's own love for the world. Remember John 3:16? For God so loved the world. He's going to express the Father's own love for the world by giving up his life for it. If he does this in obedience to the Father's will, he will also receive it back again, he says in verse 18. All right. Jesus here makes the Jewish hope of general resurrection the personal and specific aim of his own work, anticipating the longer discussion in chapter 11. That's Lazarus. That's Lazarus's chapter. Behind this, all through, though, is the ancient prophecy of Ezekiel 34. All right. There's a strange thing in that chapter. Sometimes the prophet speaks of God becoming the true shepherd of Israel, but then later, he speaks of David, in other words, of the Messiah as the true shepherd. So let me give you that sentence again. Sometimes Ezekiel speaks of God becoming the true shepherd of Israel. And this is in Ezekiel 34. But then later in the chapter, he speaks of David, right? In other words, of the Messiah as the true shepherd. Okay? With God being God over shepherd and sheep alike. So the question naturally we want to ask Ezekiel is, well, which is it, right? We want to ask Ezekiel. He doesn't answer. He just points into the future. So only in this chapter of John do we see how it all fits together, right? As Jesus will finally say in verse 30, I and the Father are one. God is the shepherd. The King is the shepherd. It makes sense in Jesus and nowhere else.
I was going to say, God tried to be a shepherd when he brought him out of Egypt, but nobody followed him.
Yeah.
It was after that they demanded a king so he'd be like everybody else.
All right. You ready to read the second half of the chapter? I'm going to have somebody else read beginning in verse 19, we want to read all the way to the end of the chapter. You don't have to, you can pass it around.
There was again a division among the Jews because of these words. Many of them said, "He has a demon and is insane. Why listen to him?" Others said, "These are not the words of one who is oppressed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind?" At that time, the Feast of Dedication took place at Jerusalem. It was winter, and Jesus was walking in the temple in the colonnade of Solomon. So the Jews gathered around him and said to him, "How long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Christ, tell us plainly." Jesus answered them, "I told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name bear witness about me. But you do not believe because you are not among my sheep. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they will never perish, and no one will snatch them out of my hand. My Father who has given them to me is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of the Father's hand. I and the Father are one."
Ooh.
Pass. Next. The Jews took up stones again to stone him. Jesus replied, "I have shown you many good works from the Father. For which of these are you going to stone me?" The Jews answered, "It is not for a good work that we are going to stone you, but for blasphemy, because you, though only a human being, are making yourself God." Jesus answered, "Is it not written in your law, I said you are gods? If those to whom the word of God came were called gods, and the scripture cannot be annulled, can you say that the one whom the Father has sanctified and sent into the world is blaspheming because I said I am God's son? If I am not doing the works of my Father, then do not believe me. But if I do them, even though you do not believe me, believe the works, so that you may know and understand that the Father is in me and I am in the Father." Then they tried to arrest him again, but he escaped from their hands. He went away again across the Jordan to the place where John had been baptizing earlier, and he remained there. Many came to him, and they were saying, "John performed no sign, but everything that John said about this man was true." And many believed in him there.
All right. A lot here.
Yeah.
What was the crowd's split reaction to Jesus' teaching about the shepherd and the sheep, and his claim about his relationship with the Father? What was their reaction?
Well, first they were like, enough of the going around the barrels,
Parables.
just say it.
He's crazy.
Yeah,
Some of them are saying he has a demon. He's crazy.
that's true.
He's out of his mind.
I forgot 19.
These passages like this don't leave up for an option. Well, Jesus was a good moral teacher. No, he wasn't. You know, like Socrates or someone else. So a really good moral teacher. But no, he wasn't. The claims that he is making are not the claims of a good moral person. He is either, I'll go back to C.S. Lewis for this, he is either he's either a Lord, liar, or a lunatic on the level of a man who thinks he's a poached egg. Seriously. I mean, there is no middle way with Jesus. He's either Lord or he's not. And especially in the Gospel of John. I've told you, Jesus in the Gospel of John walks about that far off the ground in every chapter. Nobody's doing anything to him, he's doing it, and then, my time hasn't come yet. And then when they're about ready to get him, he just disappears. He just disappears. I mean, but let's get into it. So, yeah, obviously when we get down to verse 30, we're going to have to talk about this claim of the Father and I are one. But we'll get there. All right, look at verse 25. In what specific ways that we've seen throughout John's Gospel has Jesus already clearly told the people whether or not he is the Messiah? Think back through the Gospel with me. What are the ways that he has told people? Verse 25 it's right there.
By his work.
I have told you, and you do not believe. The works.
The
What's he
works.
talking about?
Well, healing,
Okay? The wine.
the wine,
Now, that was kind of a private thing.
yeah, but
Now,
still.
that was
But
his
it's
first
still-
sign, though.
It took place though.
But he was doing these works, all these works that he's been doing, they testify to who he is, right?
Yeah,
You know, he says, I've told you, but if that isn't
I've
enough,
shown you,
I've shown you
yeah.
who I am. Right, right. And it's interesting to observe that where people have become unclear on Jesus' close relation to the Father, they have often become unclear also on the certainty of Christian hope, and vice versa. Okay? Those who hear Jesus' voice and recognize it as the voice of their shepherd will be safe forever. He will look after them, and even death itself, the last great enemy, cannot ultimately harm them. So the reason Jesus can be so confident of this is that the guarantee is his own unbreakable bond of love and union with the Father, and the fact that the sheep he owns are the ones the Father has given him. So in what way does this truth enable us to live our lives as Christians with confidence?
I don't want to say that no matter what we do, we're still saved. Because you can sin, but you can be forgiven. But even death won't take you out of his grip if that so happens.
This is where we get that slippery slope of where we could just have a good old time and go off and start talking about predestination and no. Let's just read it and take Jesus at his word here. And we'll save the systematic theologies for
Right.
another time, maybe Thursday mornings. Yeah, but yeah, the grace of God will carry us. He will not forsake us. Jesus will not. Right? And that's so comforting.
it is.
So very comforting. All right, so
Well,
go ahead.
yeah, I think back to Hinton's point about the fact that some, they tried it with the kingdom, the earthly kingdom,
Right.
and they wouldn't follow his voice, they wouldn't follow the shepherd.
Right.
And so now I think he's talking about reaching out to the entire world and calling out the real flock, those that will hear his voice.
It's a good point, Jim. It's good. Yeah. Yeah.
The thing about the book of John, I was always taught that each one of the gospels was to a different group of people. The book of John is actually written to the Christians. So he's talking to the Christians in this book.
Yeah. A lot of talk, a lot of in-house talk here. Absolutely. Yes. But unfortunately, why do they want to pick up stones and stone him?
Blasphemy.
Yeah, that's I and the Father are one.
Yeah, it's blasphemy.
You-
To them.
You don't just walk around saying stuff like that.
Yeah, that's big.
Now, I do want to go back and tell you that he's in the Portico of Solomon. And by the way, the Portico of Solomon, just to let you know, is going to be the place in the book of Acts where the church will gather before they're basically run out of the temple before too long. But when it was all Jews, so it was all Jewish followers of Jesus, and they would meet in, I think, Solomon's colonnade. Portico is another word. It was a porch in the temple, a beautiful place. And they met there. But he is there in what is called the Feast of Dedication. You may know it by a different name. And it occurred around the 25th of the month of Chislev, which for us is December. And that would be
Christ.
Hanukkah. No, we're Jewish.
Oh, that's
No,
right, that's
Okay.
right, that's right.
No, we're not doing Christmas yet.
That's
Okay,
right,
all
that's right.
But no, we've got, he's there during the Feast of Hanukkah, the Feast of Dedication. And that has its roots in the Maccabean time and the Maccabean revolt, where the Hasmoneans were at war with Antiochus Epiphanes. What a great name. Antiochus Epiphanes, who actually took a pig, the abomination
Yes.
that causes desolation, and slaughtered it on the altar in the Jerusalem temple. But they were run out. Antiochus and his goons were run out by the Hasmoneans, and the Hasmoneans ruled for a good long time until the Romans came and set up their camp, and they installed the house of Herod as their king of the Jews. All right. So it just kind of shows you connections here about what's going on. So we have the Messiah here, the king, at the Feast of Dedication, which commemorates the reign of the Hasmoneans, not related to David, which is interesting, but that hadn't gone all that well anyway. All those Davidic kings were pretty bad. You know, I don't know if you've ever had the chance to really go in depth into those kings. It just gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, which leads to the exile. But this was a bright moment for the Jews, and so it's interesting that he chooses this festival to do this. But they want to stone him. I and the Father are one. Now look at verse 34. Jesus is quoting a Bible verse that has puzzled many people, me included in that group. All right? Psalm 82. Listen to this. God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, little g, he holds judgment. Now, if I go on, let me see if I can pull up the whole text here. Yes. Now, let me just read some more here. It says, how long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? This is God talking to the king. Give justice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. They have neither knowledge nor understanding. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are shaken. I said, and this is God, you are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men, you shall die and fall like any prince. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit all the nations. That's kind of a closing verse there. All right? So, and that makes me go, huh?
Yeah.
You are gods. And it has confused Christians for quite a while. It's God himself speaking, and he's addressing Israel at Mount Sinai. He's reminding them that when the law arrived through Moses, they were given a noble, superhuman status simply by receiving it. The unity of the divine and the human had arrived in their midst. But God goes on to warn them, as Hinton pointed out, they haven't lived up to it, and so they'll be punished. So the question is then, what do you think Jesus was trying to say by quoting this passage to the Judeans who stood there ready to kill him?
Were they considered part of Israel? Okay, so, you know, in all of this that I'm reading from the beginning of the Bible,
Yeah.
you know, there are people in the world at the time of all these kings and whatnot that are not of Israel. They're not Israel.
Yeah.
So Israel has little g gods.
Yeah. It
Would
says we're all
Moses not
gods.
been?
Yeah. But he says all of you are. And what we have to do there is be careful with that word. And you know, we're not talking about Yahweh. We're not talking about Adonai. We're just talking about using that word. It's because of this coming together of God and human beings in the law that he says you are gods. Now that's another study altogether. And it's so obscure. And I would discourage this in all of my students to go and find a proof text. But since this is Jesus, I think it's best if I give him a pass on that. and so, but it is interesting. So this unity of divine and human is there. But again, what do you think he's trying to say?
I like what is said in the message.
Okay, yeah, that'd be good.
That troublesome verse is very, being the message. It's paraphrased.
What did he say?
I appointed you judges, each one of you, deputies of the high God, but you betrayed your commission, and now you're stripped of rank and busted. Oh God, give them what they've got coming. You've got the whole world in your hands.
I think that's helpful. I
Me
really
too.
do. That, they were deputized by God.
Yeah.
And
It's
So-
funny, in the
go
initial
ahead, please.
temptation, what does the snake tell Eve?
Yep,
It'll be like God.
that's right.
Yeah.
There's that
The
word.
fruit, and you'll know
Yeah.
good and evil.
That's right. That's right.
Judging. It's knowing good and evil.
Yes.
I just find it interesting that it started there and it's still going on at this point. You know,
Yeah,
Still going
and at this point,
today.
yes, yes.
I may be totally wrong, but they're accusing him of claiming to be God, and he told them, according to, I'm not sure
Right.
what is written, what they're talking about, but he
Yes, sir.
said, according to that, all of you are gods, so, you can't stone me if you're a God just
That's
like
a
I am.
great point. That's a good point.
yeah,
It's a good point.
good point, yeah.
Let me finish this off here. Got one more question. If the religious leaders in Jerusalem had difficulty with Jesus' claim, even the country folk in the land beyond the Jordan could draw the right conclusions at the end of this text. All right? They, after all, had nothing to lose. See, the question we have to face today is whether we are ready to look at Jesus with that open, vulnerable gaze and to draw the right conclusion for ourselves. So the final question tonight, mostly because of time, what kinds of concerns or anxieties keep us from looking fully at Jesus and believing in all that he is for us?
Well, for those that don't know Jesus,
Yeah,
there's a truckload of things that they don't want to give up.
that's right. Oh, I know one in the mirror sometimes, but I know lots of people who do wear that name, who are in the same spot.
Right.
That there's just stuff that they just won't let go
Don't wanna
of.
go of,
It's Christianity
Yeah.
puts its silo up besides everything else,
But
beside everything else.
it keeps the ladder that I was
Not
talking
judging,
about
not judging,
from-
but just saying,
from
Yeah.
getting to know Christ, from being amongst believers and being baptized and and giving their life to Christ. That's what
Yeah.
keeps them from it.
amen. Serving, worshiping together. Yeah, that's good. I like it. All right.
People don't
Go ahead,
have that faith that he really is what he says he is.
You're right. You're right. Let me give you this note on just this whole chapter, and we're done. When we think of leaders, we think of people, because remember, this is all under the heading of the Good Shepherd and everything. And remember, there was no chapter 10. That was put in later. So this is all also on the back of chapter 9. And if you will recall, the man born blind and that whole discussion. And here we are, next paragraph, next scene. But when we think of leaders, we think of people running big corporations. We think of like presidents and prime ministers and things like that. In the Bible, the ideal king is pictured as a shepherd. Again, Ezekiel 34. Perhaps modeled on the shepherd boy David, who became the king after God's own heart, but we all know he had his own issues. So in a world where they knew about the intimate contact and trust between shepherd and sheep, this was their preferred way of talking about kingship. So back in verses 7 through 10, Jesus highlights the role of shepherd as a gate. Eastern sheepfolds, in many Eastern sheepfolds, the shepherd lies down at night in the gateway to stop the sheep getting out and to stop predators getting in. So the emphasis here is on the safety and the fulfilled life of the sheep.
Cool.
And that's what's important. So, and this sets us up for the raising of Lazarus next week and all that that entails. And doggone it, a woman makes the good confession. Peter does not get that honor in this gospel. It is a woman who is cut to her heart poor over the death of her brother. And I absolutely love that and cherish that.
Hey, Brian.
All right, go and be well fed. Speaking of,
Yes.
Obi, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Thank you to everybody who's going to be viewing this streaming and all the ones that are here. Thank
Brian,
you so much.
I can't.
Everyone,
sweetie, but
don't
thank
forget.
you.
Golden Travelers has been moved to Saturday at noon. And Stations of the Cross will continue to occur at 7 o'clock on Friday night. And the men's breakfast has been moved to next Saturday at 9 o'clock. So, Lord willing, God bless everyone.